Right, so we'll move on to our unique segment of the week, which is simply titled, and Carl, you might give it a better title when it comes to the graphics, but simply titled, The Best Wrestling Games, or The Best Wrestling Video Games, or our favourite wrestling video games.
Okay.
So I'll give a bit of a precursor before we talk about them. Basically, you and I grew up on wrestling, and we grew up on video games. Now,
Yep.
there were many a time after school we would go to either my house or your house or whichever, and we would just spend hours either watching wrestling or playing wrestling games. Now, I'm trying to be general about it. Most of the time, it was the PS2, and it was some iteration of WWF SmackDown.
Obviously.
Obviously.
Classics.
And our favourite thing to do was create a wrestlers and set up our awesome tag team, naturally, and run through the story modes. Or I was particularly made up when they brought in GM mode and stuff like that. So I just wanted to have a bit of a nostalgic look back and a bit of a talk about some of the wrestling games that we loved growing up and sort of why we love them. Because I'll be honest, a couple on this list are shit to actually play. They are awful, but they've got things in them that are fantastic and that we loved. So I'm going to leave it to you to kick off, Carl, because your wrestling game history goes back much further than mine. So in the interest of starting as early as we can, I'll start it off with your good self if I could, Carl.
Yes, so the first few are very early on, shall we say, in the world of wrestling video games. The first one I want to bring to the table is 1991's arcade edition of WWF WrestleFest. Now, you may have never heard of this game. But
I genuinely haven't, Carl. This is going to be an education for me, this one.
So, basically, in the Concourse Shopping Centre, Anthony,
Nice.
outside by the bus stop, way back when, I remember as a young child waiting for the bus with my dad, going to wherever the hell we were going. They had this on an arcade machine, actually at the bus stop. And so every time we'd wait for the bus, I'd be begging my dad to let me have a go at it. I was doing about 3 or 4 at the time, and it was probably my dad playing more than it was me, but I was obsessed with it, right? And it was just awesome. Like, so obviously, I'm a massive Mr. Perfect fan. He was in the game. You had Hogan, you had Warrior, you had Earthquake, Sergeant Slaughter, Ted DiBiase, Big Boss Man, Jake Roberts. You had Demolition, you had Legion of Doom. Like, considering it was, I don't know what it was, about fucking 8-bit or something at this point, it was awesome. It was such a good game, and it was like a classic arcade button basher, the old joystick. It was amazing, and I just remember some of my fondest times as a kid, because let's be honest, I probably played this. It came out in 91. It was probably still in the Connie by like 94. Let's be honest.
I think they've got rid of it now, if that helps.
Okay, yeah, it was still there a couple of months ago, so yeah, maybe now they finally have. But I'll never forget just like standing out there in the cold, like probably being lifted up by my dad while I played this game, and just absolutely just being obsessed with it as like a very small child. So for me, this was like my first wrestling game, and it was fucking awesome. And I still think it's awesome to this day.
I'm going to ask for an honest opinion, Carl. When was the last time you played the game?
Do you know what? Too long ago. Like literally, because
so it's been a while, right?
Because it was arcade only, and I've not managed to get like an arcade emulator.
Or any sort of emulation, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask, and this is going to be difficult because it's been a very long time. I imagine you were still a kid when you last played it.
Yeah.
Was the game actually quite good to play, or is this all about the nostalgia for you?
Do you know what? I think the gameplay of this game actually wasn't too bad. I feel like it was pretty straightforward because it was obviously limited to an arcade machine. So there wasn't like overcomplication with controls and buttons.
Yeah,
and
to be
like
fair.
It was literally, there was like a button to punch, a button to kick, and a button to grapple, I think. And then like the joystick. But yeah, I just remember, I think they had like a Royal Rumble bit that they added at some point to it as well, which kind of like beefed it up a little. But I just remember always choosing Mr. Perfect, always trying to take it out on Hulk Hogan. It was classic Carl, younger years.
Nice. But no, that's a great one to start with, Carl. And I hope, upon hope, that you find that emulation.
Me too. It's got to be out there somewhere. You need to play that again.
Defo. And again, sadly, because I normally like to do these one-on-one, but we're still in the Carl early years. So do you want to tell us
Because
your
I'm an
next
old
one?
bastard, the first few are going to be me, let's be honest, right? But the next one,
Weirdly, this is the funny thing. You're younger than me. You've just been in the wrestling scene a lot
I
longer.
know. But the next one was probably one of my favorite wrestling games ever, to be honest. It was 1993's. It was on a few platforms, but I had it on the SNES, and it was WWF Royal Rumble, and it was an Acclaim title, and it was like first proper time where on a home console, especially, you could play the Royal Rumble kind of aspect of the game. And I just remember the gameplay being fucking awesome. So you'd always lock up with someone and you'd be like forward, backward. You'd have to button bash a bit and build your power bar up until you got control. Then you could perform your move. But I always remember, like, again, I'd go Mr. Perfect. Even though Bret Hart was in this game, to be honest, the roster was pretty good from memory. So you had, like,
I suppose it'd need to
Perfect,
be stacked, wouldn't it, for like a Royal Rumble?
like,
So
honestly, legit. I mean, and thinking about it as well, like, back then, the rosters on these games, because I think we were probably up to 16-bit maybe by now. I'm still probably wrong, but there's no memory there to store these characters. But still, they had. Let me just try and pull it up. Who they had? They had Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, Mr. Perfect, Randy Savage, Ric Flair, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, Crush, Jim Duggan, IRS, Papa Shango, and Tatanka. Like literally, like
yeah.
fucking epic roster. That, to be fair, for a game of its time. But like I just remember having it on my SNES, and just remember it was the most played game I ever had. And just the whole mechanics of it, the whole fact it was a Royal Rumble. If you hit your finishing move, you could hit your finishing move over the top rope, which I thought was amazing.
Nice.
So it literally was a classic in the old school wrestling world, and I've played this one quite a few times over the years, like emulated on like the Wii and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely a fantastic wrestling game that hasn't really. I mean, obviously it's aged, but for me, like it still kind of holds true today. It's just like a little kind of button bashing kind of arcade game.
Nice. I can't offer much. I do vaguely remember this. I had a SNES. I think I had the game at one point, and it was a lot of fun. But again, I wasn't even aware enough to go, oh, that's Mr. Perfect. I probably went for Hulk Hogan or whatever
Yeah,
because that was the one I knew. Do you know what I mean? That
yeah.
was sort of my approach to wrestling at that time. So again, I can't offer much, but I can respect the fact that it was a really fun game to play. Which
Oh yeah.
I find interesting with wrestling games because they're either they seem to be one end of the spectrum or the other. You never get one that's okay. It's either awful to play or brilliant. Like unless you can give me an example, I can't think of one that was strictly in the middle. They were either just
No,
dog shit or
no,
they
they're pretty much just great or shit, aren't they?
yeah.
There's no two ways about it. Okay, so then the next one I've got was from 1995. So this one had made its way into PS1 by this point. But basically, this was WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game. And this was actually made by Midway. So I'm a massive Mortal Kombat fan. And this was
Yes, you are.
I think it was probably the one and only title that Midway made. But it had such Mortal Kombat feels. It was literally
Fatalities.
realistic. Well, I mean, it had like special moves and stuff. That I think like the Undertaker would throw a tombstone at you and stuff. You know, like it was
Yes, it
silly
went like
kind of.
very arcadey, isn't it? That's the
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, so the kind of premise of it was to be like, what if WWF had like a Mortal Kombat style game, but so there was like weapons,
it's
there was
almost like
like
the very
special.
infant version of Battlegrounds. I feel like they totally
Yeah,
ripped the
kind
shit
of.
off. I say that because I saw the trailer and I'm confident that Undertaker hits you with an actual tombstone.
Oh well, there you go. Yeah, so they've basically just stolen that then. But yeah, I mean, like this was at a time. I think when did I say it was 1995?
Sorry,
This was at a
95. Yeah.
time where the roster in WWF was shite. Like, let's be honest. Hogan was gone, Warrior was gone, Savage was gone. Like
Yeah,
all
a lot
these
of the
big
new talent
stars.
hadn't built up or been in
Yeah.
joined yet. Yeah, it was.
So literally, you had a roster, which I mean, it's not awful. Don't get me wrong, but you had a roster of Bam Bam Bigelow, Doink the Clown, Lex Luger, Yokozuna, Razor Ramon, and then you had Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, and Bret Hart. So
I
they
mean,
were obviously the three.
thank God, Doink the Clown was in there.
Well, you know what? To be honest, I actually played as him quite a bit at this game because he would literally just do like weird whoopee cushion kind of like throw
Yeah,
his
to be
ass at you
fair, yeah,
kind of thing.
imagine in that setting, he's probably one of the most fun to play.
Yeah, he was awesome. But I think I don't know. For me, the reason why this makes the list, it just reminded me so much of Mortal Kombat, and I was a massive Mortal Kombat fan, and just to see like the wrestlers, like it felt so realistic at the time because similar to Mortal Kombat, it was sprites of actual those guys, and it wasn't like built out of graphics as such. It was like just them in like the pictures of them basically that were moving around. So like I don't know, for me at the time, I was like, "Whoa, this the graphics is amazing," and I could overlook the silly special effects and stuff because it felt so realistic at the time.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. For me, it was just I've got to include it on the list. I know a lot of people preferred the later version of it, which I think was in your house, where it was basically I think it was Acclaim or someone took the midway version and just tried to rip it off basically, and it just wasn't as good in my opinion. I think it had more characters and different arenas and stuff, but it just I mean, I think it was in a ring, but it was like in random locations and stuff. Like it was just, I don't know, it was a bit shit to be honest. But I know a lot of people preferred it. But for me, the WrestleMania arcade game was the bread and butter.
Yeah.
And then I suppose this next one's me as well. Then I suppose you can probably speak
Sorry,
about Smack the one after.
I can join you after that. But yeah.
So the last one I'm gonna waffle on about is WWF Attitude from 1999. So previously in '98 they had Warzone, which was like the first kind of I'm not even sure who built it. I don't think it was Ukes or anything. It might still be an Acclaim at this point. I'm not sure. Or THQ. Maybe it was THQ.
I think THQ, because THQ was certainly involved with all of the SmackDown games, but I think
Yeah.
you might be right about WWF Attitude because I think Ukes were the changing factor.
Yeah.
And we'll get onto that, but I think you're right. I think it might have been THQ for this one.
Yeah, so I think obviously Warzone was like the year prior, and it was like the first kind of foray into 3D, and it was awesome. But Attitude built upon that and just made it even better. You could have a creative wrestler mode. It was the first time I proper got into exploring that kind of side of what a wrestling game could bring you. You could create an arena, I think, at this point as well, which is really early on. So you could like choose your ring lights and your ring mat and your entrances and stuff like that. I just think for its time, it was so ahead of the game, and they had like this little feature in it as well, which I just thought was awesome, where when you created a wrestler or when you were looking at the wrestlers that you had like a sound bite. So like you were picking your personality, whether you're heel, whether you're face, whatever. But you could also pick like a sound bite for them. And like I just remember just going through and just listening to all the sound bites on repeat of like the wrestlers, and like some of them were pretty shit, and it was just like I don't know, like Road Dogg would just be like, "Oh, you didn't know," but like you had like a few little gems in there. I'm not sure whether this was Warzone or Attitude, but like X-Pac would be like, "Your ass is grass, and I'm gonna smoke it," and stuff like that. And me, like naive kid at the time, didn't have a fucking clue what that meant, but I was like, "Yeah, this is awesome." And you had Droz, his soundbite was just him being sick. You know what I mean? It was just like stupid shit. But yeah, I don't know. I just loved it. I thought it was just such a, and for its time as well, for a 3D game. If like I remember just thinking this is fucking so
Well, this was
weird.
kind of the starting point, wasn't it? This was the starting point of wrestling games becoming so much more
Yeah,
realistic. It's probably the right
yeah,
word for it.
definitely. Yeah,
And if it's all right with you, we can move on to the next one because I feel like the building blocks were there and it's
yeah,
set up for what I think is fair to say was the absolute fucking game changer. I think
yeah,
this blew all the other wrestling games around the time out of the water. Now, I never had an N64, Carl, so I couldn't tell you what those games were, but I know that there was some really popular wrestling games on the N64. But if you were like me and you had a PlayStation, you didn't really pay much attention to them. And we didn't have much really. All due respect to WWF Attitude, we didn't have much in terms of decent wrestling games. But then THQ and Ukes and probably a few other companies came along and they gave us WWF SmackDown, the very first, Carl, the very first. And this was an absolutely awesome game. Now, the fantastic thing about these games as well is that they just got built upon. Sadly, not so much these days, but like I could easily just say the first three were awesome. Like,
yeah.
I don't think it's even unfair to say that they just
No,
each one improved on the last, and the kind of all blended in that. Even the I played the music for you before, and they all shared the same music because they were like very similar in build, and they just sort of built upon it. But this was like a game changer in a sense of like suddenly the character models were much better. They developed the 3D a lot better. The moves, the moves looked a bit, barring a couple, they looked a lot more like accurate, less clunky. Like a Tombstone, for instance, on the Undertaker looked decent in terms of the render and the graphics. You had the creative wrestling elements. You had the entrances. Although I do remember, like it's weird to think about it now when I look at games now, but like their entrances was like the character model just walking in front of a screen. Like you wouldn't see them come down the ramp or anything, but just that they had the actual video. They had some music. Everything was just at the time just mind blowing. And I even remember as kids we were like, "This is so realistic." It fucking wasn't, but it just felt so awesome at the time. And I think this was the start of us constantly creating, and at the sake of slight embarrassment, constantly creating Powerhouse and. What was yours called at the time? I want to say Chaos. Did you have another one before that, or was it always Chaos? Because I never stuck with Powerhouse, but I remember that being the original creator wrestler I made every fucking time. Was your I'm confident I don't recall you ever creating another one with a different name, but I'm trying to remember whether there was.
I mean, I think I had a few different ones over time, but it was mainly Chaos that kind of became.
Yeah.
he
was yours, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had like the Dominator at one point or something, like as you do. But then Chaos was where it was at.
And naturally, they were a tag team, Carl, because we're awesome and we were going to be a tag team.
Oh yeah.
And again, at the sake of embarrassment, that legitimately at the time we're kids and we were going to be wrestlers when we grew up. That was always going to happen.
Obviously.
So yeah, the first SmackDown game, and to be honest, the following two as well, I think all kind of meld together. But we had a pretty awesome roster at the time. You had all the big hitters such as the likes of Kane and Undertaker, Triple H, and I think Mankind was in the first one as well. But even its player, but like the actual control of the game was just so fluid and so nice to play, and so simple in a lot of senses as well. Like you mentioned Mortal Kombat, and it's kind of fortuitous that you did, because that's kind of what we're used to with games. Like you get to your finisher move and it's like a big button combo. And I don't know, there's something in the simplicity of SmackDown where you build up to your finisher, and then it's one button and you do your finisher. Do you know what I mean? It was more of a set up a character damage and stamina really, and it was just a lot simpler, but not in a bad way. It was really quite fun to play as well. But an absolutely awesome game. And just as a slight mention as well, they usually hid a few little Easter eggs in this. And I remember pointing one out to you, Carl. And this wasn't in the first game. This was actually in the second one. We had the Big Show and Ken Shamrock were originally planned to be in the game, and were released or whatever before the game came out. So they removed them, but they didn't fully remove them. So as a little Easter egg, if you had a Royal Rumble, there were chances that they could come out because the characters were rendered and modeled in the game. So they never had their entrance video or anything like that because they didn't go that far. But the fully rendered character and their moveset was in the game. To the point you could actually create them in the creator wrestlers, but even if you didn't, if you had a Royal Rumble, you could get a random entrant that weren't even in your playable roster. It was crazy. And you used to get fun stuff like that. Plus, one last thing, I think, were these the first games to actually introduce the backstage elements where you could interact with the backstage and fight backstage and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
So that I'll stop fanboying out, but fucking awesome games.
Well, I mean, I think we've got like one of them listed later on, but I think as you mentioned as well, like every SmackDown that came out just continued to build upon it and added new features every time. And it was like whatever the fans wanted. Like, I want to be able to have an Inferno match. Okay, you can have it. I want to be able to, fight in the crowd. You can have it. I want to be able to go backstage. It was just like they just delivered every time, and like they cared. Legit. The development team legitimately cared.
Oh yeah, there were points when you could have like bra and panties matches. That's how much they cared. They would render that shit. They don't care.
Yeah,
they do it.
I'm sure they enjoyed that. To be fair,
but yeah, just honestly, they're the best ones. And I mean no disrespect to 2K, but they will never compete with this. Never.
No.
Remaster these. That's all I want. So the next one I'll mention, Carl. We're actually moving over to the PS2 now, and this game, I'm trying to be fair to it and putting it on the list, right? I didn't enjoy the way this game played because I was spoilt. I enjoyed the SmackDown games, so I wanted the SmackDown games in terms of the control with the roster from Legends of Wrestling. So Legends of Wrestling is exactly what it says on the tin, and the reason it's on this list and the reason that we like it is the fact that it was a roster of legends and set in those eras. So it wasn't like the Hulk Hogan that came back with Voodoo Child and the post NWO stuff. This was original Hogan, and obviously you had the likes of your Sergeant Slaughters and your Mr. Perfects and the like. But this was and you'd probably be able to talk more on Legends than I would, Carl. But this was a proper great game for those who were into that era of wrestling, and a good way of bringing them all together in one roster. And it was really well put together, but in terms of playability, probably not as good as WWF SmackDown, in all fairness.
And I think as well, the roster side of things was a little bit disappointing, to be honest, because even though it was like, I remember seeing this be announced. I think it was in Game Master magazine, and obviously I was a big subscriber to that because I was a massive gamer at the time, and I was like, oh my god, they're going to do a video game that's got all the because obviously I'm a massive fanboy of the old 1991, 92, 93 maybe at a push. It's like peak kind of Carl's in love with wrestling time, whereas what came out in the game, like obviously you had Hogan, that was kind of it, and it was like, in terms of your wrestlers, you didn't have Ultimate Warrior, you didn't have Savage, you didn't have Perfect, you didn't have kind of that many at all, really. I don't even think you had.
Was Perfect?
You didn't have like Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
I don't think so. Unless I'm thinking of one of the sequels, because I think they made 2 actual follow-ups to this game as well.
Yeah, I definitely don't think he was in the original because I remember being a bit pissed off about it. But like you had, it was one of them. You had to call it Legends of Wrestling and then not include like some of the fucking main legends of all time. It just felt a bit like I didn't even have like Bulldog in there. You didn't have Owen Hart in there. It was just a bit, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So for people like Carl, this was a frustrating fucking mess of a game.
Yeah, and
where are the people?
He tried to they tried to kind of plug the gaps and stuff because they had, ECW legends in there and stuff. They had like Rob Van Dam. They had it was great, like from not necessarily from like a generational standpoint, but from like an inter kind of company standpoint, if that makes sense. Like they had
I take your point,
mix
because this is the first time they'd sort of mixed anything up really, because I think this is before Invasion stuff, isn't it? Really, so in terms of games release, anyway.
Yeah, I just think in terms of the legends, it was a bit too. Like I think I'm just looking at the like you had Cowboy Bob Orton, you know what I mean? You had some of the Von Erichs, but you didn't really like. Did you have Kerry Von Erich? I don't even know if Texas Tornado was in there. You had like fucking Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson. It's just like these guys are like really just I don't know. Sure, they're legends, but they're not mainstream. So it was just a bit like.
I take your points. What I would do though, is to give it to as fair a point as I can, and the reason I think it deserves to be on this list is that this game was released at a time when the WWF games weren't in the habit of putting legends in their games.
Yeah.
So this was pretty much your only shot at getting any legends in a game. It's probably not as impactful now. You play like any of the 2K games, and they have pretty much a full roster of legendary wrestlers that are all part of the Hall of Fame, and they have that sort of Hall of Fame section now. But the games we were playing at the time, the WWF SmackDown games, I think barring Here Comes the Pain, which is on the list and we'll talk about, I think they weren't including legends either. So this is probably the first time that we had any sort of a semblance of a roster of legends. So for what it was at the time, as much of a disappointment as it was to the likes of Carl, who wanted Mr. Perfect, it was an innovative concept, let's say, and may have failed a little bit on execution, but in terms of idea, I think deserves to be on this list.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with that.
Cool.
Just needs more Mr. Perfect. You know what I'm saying?
And I'll do the. How many have you done? A ton of them.
I've done most of them. You can do the rest.
Fair enough. So the next one, Carl, is WWF Raw.
Mm-hmm.
So almost as a counterpoint to the PlayStation having the SmackDown games. Xbox on their release brought out in 2002 brought out WWF Raw. Now, this game, in a lot of senses, does not deserve a place on this list. But for one very solid reason, Carl and I love this game, right? And that reason is you could import your own audio and you could create your own entrance, which was something that you weren't really getting in the SmackDown side of things, not to the level that this was getting anyway. And yeah, you couldn't, like, this was, in terms of graphics, it was really quite good. I remember on Creator Wrestlers, you'd turn up the, I don't know what you call it. You made them really shiny, so they looked more like you could increase the sheen to the point that they looked more like the ones that were properly rendered. I remember doing that with literally everyone. Make them shiny. Or they looked a bit odd compared to the rest of the proper wrestlers. But you could, because the Xbox had a hard drive and you could sort of store a lot more on it than you could the PlayStation 2. You were able to then upload your own music to the entrances, which just added a whole new fun element to it. The actual gameplay was shit.
Oh, it was awful.
Not fun to play. It was clunky. It was unresponsive, and it was awful. But we never used to play it, so it's fine. We used to just create entrances, create.
We were just in create all the time,
just creating shit, and it was hours of fun. And I do mean hours of fun just for that. We used to. We were getting to a point we were editing songs to be our entrance themes, to bring them in to see how it worked, see how it looked and stuff like that. It was hours.
I think as well. I can't. I could be wrong. Was this where you could the first game where you could put like a different entrance attire, or you could have like a second attire or something?
You're quite right. You could have like your entrance attire could be different to your ring attire, so you could come down with a shirt on that was for your entrance that you didn't have when you were in the ring and stuff like that. Yeah. You could,
which I think was like mind blowing at the time. We're like, we can make a T-shirt to wear.
Yeah, and I think that is something that they do now in the 2K games. To be fair, so certain elements have been carried over. I do genuinely wish they'd let you bring your own songs in. I get why they try and avoid that, but from a licensing point of view, surely the responsibility be on us for uploading them. I don't know, but or tie in with Amazon Music. Fuck it.
Well, exactly. I was thinking that fucking Amazon Music or Spotify or something. Just yeah.
I'd probably subscribe to Spotify just to do that.
Remember fucking Zune. You know, if
Zune.
if Xbox would have allowed you to just hook up to Zune as well, could we carried on?
You know, for at least a little while before the Zune died. So so WWF Raw, wouldn't recommend it to play, but if you love creating stuff, this was hours of fun, and to be honest, I dare say, from the creative suite side of things, was leaps ahead of WWF SmackDown. Don't know if you disagree with me there, Carl. You did a lot of creating wrestlers. No,
completely agree. It was just hours of fun. Just not for playing the actual game.
Yeah, fair enough. So moving over then, we hit 2003, Carl, and we, in the WWE or WWF as it was at the time, we are now at the peak of like Brock Lesnar coming in as the new big bad, the new top guy, and we released the next WWF SmackDown game, and what I failed to mention is previously all of them, because SmackDown is The Rock's. They were all titled after The Rock, so we had like Know Your Role, Shut Your Mouth. What was the other one? There was one just called SmackDown.
Yeah, you had the first one was SmackDown. The second one was Know Your Role, Just Bring It.
Just Bring It. That was the one I couldn't remember.
Here comes pain.
And so this one, there's the first time it wasn't sort of titled after a catchphrase of The Rock's. So it was called Here Comes the Pain. The cover art was Brock Lesnar, and this was on the PS2. I think you had the PS2 first, Carl, so I remember coming to yours to play this one. And again, another awesome addition to what were an awesome set of games in the SmackDown games. This, sadly, there's not a lot more you can say about it. This, again, just developed on what was already the base with the SmackDown games. I believe they changed up the controls a little bit, but nothing to their detriment too much. Updated rosters and the like, but in terms of the gameplay and the creative suite, it was still very much a SmackDown game and very enjoyable. But this was am I right in saying this was the first one on the PS2, Carl? Did we have one of the other ones? I feel like Just Bring It might have been. Either way,
I think
in
maybe
terms of it,
Just Bring It onwards, but I think as you said, this was kind of the culmination of all the hard work and the changes and iterations they've done of the SmackDown series.
Yeah, and this was probably whether or not it was the first one on the PS2. This was a definite the first time that they used the potential of the PS2. This was a good leap in terms of the graphic ability and the like as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, just an all-out awesome game. I don't know if you have anything you want to say in a Carl, because it is just a build on what the previous games were. So there wasn't a lot of change, but obviously updated rosters straight away off the bat. Like, we're all over that. I think this was you actually had the full entrances on this as well. They weren't just walking in front of a screen.
Yeah, so I think it was literally they'd done literally everything they could to make it as realistic as possible. They had legends in it as well, so they had like different versions of the Undertaker. You had, I think, Jimmy Snuka, Roddy Piper was in there, Ted DiBiase as well. So I think you mentioned where historically they weren't really using legends, or if they did have anyone like Fred Durst or something fucking mental, but they had actual legends in this one. And I think from the kind of the game modes as well that they had in place, I think the kind of the season mode or the GM mode or stuff like that was really coming into its kind of its full swing in this. And I think they might have introduced some additional create modes in this. I'm not sure whether this is the first time we saw create a finisher, maybe, or create a.
I think you might be right in terms of, I think both create a moveset and finisher as well. The thing that I distinctly remember with this game was actually the way they set up the story mode, because you'd walk around the hallway backstage.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And you'd have to go into like Vince McMahon's office or whichever, or you could run into other wrestlers backstage and stuff.
I thought that was awesome.
I know that setup really sticks in my mind, like the way that was put together. And yeah, this I dare say probably one of the better story modes. It had some sort of interestingly, Carl, the GM mode with the actual title GM mode was actually brought in to SmackDown versus Raw. So what they had in this was, I don't know exactly what they called it, but it was something similar. This was like the infancy of GM mode, as it were, where you could sort of set up the shows as it like what matches were happening that night. But the actual full GM mode was actually only brought in to SmackDown versus Raw, believe it or not.
Oh, fucking hell. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's just how your mind works in terms of the past, because I remember it being in this game as well, and I had a look on the internet researching it. I was like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
But yeah, so all in all, this led us to the sadly the last game in the SmackDown series. So they went for a massive change on this, and the next game brought out, and the next game on our list was actually in 2006. So we're talking some 3 years later, and we bring in SmackDown versus Raw. So we're still on the PS2, and this was. It felt like a massive change up just in terms of the way they branded it. This was right at the time of the draft split. I believe that was a large part of the story mode in this game as well, Carl, where you had to participate in the draft split. Mm-hmm. And you could control elements of that as well, of who got branded to where. And this is where the full, like the most detailed and fun playable GM mode was in this game, where you would take control of one of the brands going up against the other brand, because obviously the point of SmackDown versus Raw. So you could take control of Raw, I could take control of SmackDown, and we could go up against each other. And again, hours of fun. The GM mode alone was awesome. I would happily play a fantasy wrestling game just purely based on this GM mode. You didn't need the action. You didn't even need to see the actual fucking matches. Just have the stats. You're a stats nerd, Carl. You'd love that. But yeah, the sort of innovation with this, the massive title change, but the sort of leaning into the concept of the brand splits and having the drafts and then pulling in this GM mode where you go, right, you've drafted these wrestlers and this is the shows you're putting together. Absolute hours of fun and a really good game. Again, in terms of the wrestling controls, I think they hadn't really changed. There's always been somewhat changes to the controls, but I don't think anything too big until you get to the 2K series. These were all still very like, this is your punch, this is your kick, these are your controls, there's your finisher, that sort of thing. I distinctly remember they changed the damage system a few times, where you had like the little body on the screen and showed you the damaged areas and stuff like that. But
quite like that.
Yeah, to be fair. And it's something they actually use in the 2K games now, but I think the original SmackDown, if you remember, it was like little circles, and you'd lose circles as you were taking damage. So again, just refined what originally was set up. They never wanted to ruin the original formula. It was a success. It worked. But the brand split element was really well executed, better executed than WWE actually did with the actual brand split, Cal. And then the last one, and so I'll let Carl do the honourable mentions, but the last one was, I wanted to be fair, because really speaking, I didn't really play any wrestling games after the SmackDown versus Raw, believe it or not. I never played any of the other SmackDown versus Raws, and never really followed much after that. And then for whatever reason, I started getting hyped up for WWE 2K17, which by no means was the first 2K game, but I don't know. I was getting on board for that. Bought into the hype with the trailers and had to get the game. So this is the first time I played a wrestling game on the PS4, and absolutely awesome game. And it was missing a lot of elements that I'd had previously loved. It was a lot less goofy. They were trying to be more serious. It's a 2K game, so they're trying to be more sports-like with it. The controls were a lot harder to get used to, but I think ultimately better, because obviously there's a lot more mapped in there in terms of movesets, so you have to do something with it. Do you know what I mean? But overall, once you get used to it, really fun to play, really quite fun to control, I suppose. But one of the favorite things I love doing on this was Royal Rumbles. And again, you had a big stacked roster. You had a nice big roster of legends. Again, you could have fun with this card. I don't know if you ever did this one. I think we might have done it a couple of times, but you could have fun with this and set up Royal Rumbles just purely with legends. So you just classically, you could have Typhoon and Earthquake and everyone, you know what I mean? So I was a fun just in that sense. Sadly, they dropped things like the GM mode and stuff like that, which was a lot of fun. So it's a shame. But what they did introduce, Carl, and this, sadly, I'm listing 2K17 because this is the one I bought and played and really enjoyed. But by all accounts, the 2016 one had the better version of this. But they brought in the showcase mode, where you could play through the history of a particular wrestler. Now, the 2K17 showcase, I think, was the women's one, so it wasn't a specific wrestler, but it was going through like the women's evolution kind of thing. But the 2016 one, which I think is a really good example of how the showcase can work in terms of a nostalgic pop for you, Carl, was going through Stone Cold Steve Austin's career. So you'd follow his career, and then you'd play the pivotal matches. And as a concept, I think showcase mode is brilliant. And a great addition, especially when you lost so many things in the changeover to 2K, because obviously Ukes are no longer involved, and it kind of lost some of the goofy charm and tried to take a more serious stance. Even the backstage stuff weren't as goofy or as fun to do, but still a good game in its own right, and still had some really good elements to it. And if I could make one magic game where it brought in everything that I loved, I certainly would. And sadly, they are pretty much like any game of the modern day, where they bring them out before they're ready, and there's a lot of glitches in them. So like a lot of people hate 2K19, for instance, because it just wasn't ready. Or was it 2K20? What one are we on now?
I think they hate most of the recent 2Ks, to be fair. I know I've not played one.
And they do, but they have to patch them. They constantly have to patch it. You could get it now, and you could get 2K20 now, and it will play reasonably well. But when you get it when it first comes out, and there's nothing but a lot of frustrating bugs, it ruins the experience. And a lot of games are guilty of it. I'm not just blaming WWE, but I think it's kind of sours the fun of a lot of the newer games.
Yeah,
I haven't actually played one since 2K17. I haven't bought one since 2K17. I'm actually tempted to get one because we talk about wrestling so much more with these podcasts, and I kind of want to just angrily play one.
Well, I think it was interesting the fact that you picked 2K17 because for me, 2K16 was the one that I was so looking forward to. And it was to the point where I'd pre-ordered it on Amazon and it had been dispatched early. And I was like, oh my God, it's out today, it's out today, it's out today. Got to about 8 o'clock at night and it still hadn't arrived. And I remember getting on the phone to Amazon because I was so pissed off. And they were like, oh yeah, it should arrive today. And basically the delivery driver just stole it. I just never got it. And I
What a
remember being
bastard.
so annoyed because I was looking forward to it all day. I eventually got a replacement like 2 days later, and I was so fucking fuming.
That
But
is
the game
frustrating.
itself, like the showcase mode that you mentioned there was Stone Cold, was so well done. You had like video packages that showed you pivotal moments, and you got to actually play those scenes and stuff. And you could, have Austin and Jake, for example. You could have Austin and Brett, and it was fantastic. So
Yeah.
it was
I dare
the
say
last
that like
game.
genuine highlight
Mhm.
of those games was the showcase mode, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely, and it was the last game that I was really just into for a wrestling game. I remember turning Chaos into Cody Cruz at this point because everyone had
Nice.
real life names. So
Because that's what it's about, yeah. I think it's only fair to mention as well because it's dawned on me while you were saying about the showcase mode and your newly named creator wrestler. This was both 2K16 and onwards. They introduced like a face mapping kind of thing where you could take a photograph of yourself and upload it to their
yeah,
servers and then use it again for your creator wrestler. Which I spent hours trying to get one that looked like me based on my face, which I think I landed reasonably well. I don't know if you
mm,
remember my creator wrestler, but he wasn't too bad. Uh,
yeah, I remember it.
but yeah, like that again, another like when you're into the creator wrestler mode, it just adds another element to help sort of make it so much more accurate. On top of that, you could upload your own graphics and stuff like that. So, like as an example, if we were to buy 2K21 when it does come out eventually, or 2K22, whatever they're going to call it, we would be able to potentially create ourselves and then create our A to K t-shirts. That's the level you could go to,
Can upload
and
our logos, boy.
exactly. And you were able to do stuff like that, and to the point you can actually upload it onto their service for everyone to use. So
Yeah,
you could download other stuff people have created. So if you were particularly shit at creator wrestlers, but you wanted to see, I don't know, Cody Rhodes in his AEW get up in a WWE game, someone has probably created it, and you could just look through the libraries of creator wrestlers and all the images and all the stuff they've uploaded to create that wrestler. You could just bring all that in as well. So the creating suite side of it was an amazing use of the sort of the internet, as it were. Really, like
I
everyone's
remember
connected,
seeing
and yeah. Sorry, go on.
I remember seeing people actually make the whole AEW arena and all the AEW roster. It just felt like an AEW game, and it was just like it's insane the amount of power these creators have got now to actually make a game that they want, like
That's
however
the
they
thing.
want
It's
it to.
it's crazy good, isn't it? I remember any time a wrestler debuted or even changed their attire, you'd have it there. Like, and
Yeah.
that was the weird thing because when we played games as a kid, you could like Kane unmasked, but you couldn't modify Kane in the game. But you'd have to
Mm.
create a whole new Kane. In this now, it's like, oh yeah, you can download what the creator wrestler someone else has made and upload it against. So like, I remember Finn Balor changed his attire. And someone had created the attire he changed it to, and you could just download that and put it against Finn.
Yeah.
And it's like that I don't know why, but that as a concept kind of blew my mind. It's like I can modify the existing wrestlers. This is insane.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
incredible, I suppose, in that regard, like how far they've come.
yeah, and
Especially
you
since we
might
were
be
quite
able
big on
of
the
a
create modes.
exactly, and anyone who has never played the games that we played as kids would be like, this is still shit. But for us, it's like that's mind blowing considering the limitations we used to have. So yeah, from a creative side, it's it's probably more fun than it ever was. But yeah, there are certain things you miss, and I think they have leaned into that a little bit. So some of the changes they made going forward, and I think people are still begging for a GM mode to come back. But I don't know. We'll see what the next game brings. So
Awesome.
Carl, I believe you have some honourable mentions you'd like to throw in.
Yeah, so I don't want to spend too long on these points necessarily, but ones that I don't think either of us felt strongly enough to list as our favourite games. But um, I've just got three down here that I felt it was worth having a little bit of a discussion of. The first one of which being what seems to be the most popular wrestling game amongst anyone who plays wrestling games was No Mercy. from 2000 for the N64. Now, I had this game, and I know you mentioned that you never had the N64.
Yeah,
I
never,
got
never
this
went for it.
game. I remember, I think I traded in like, I don't know, like a Dreamcast or something and a load of games, and then paid like a little bit of extra or something to pick up an N64 with this game. And I got it and brought it back, played it, and it was okay. If anything, I felt it was a little bit clunky. And so I just, it didn't resonate with me whatsoever. But
Mm.
everyone thinks that this game has got the best match engine of any game ever. So much so to the point that AEW, when they bring out their wrestling game, are going to try to use this engine.
Interesting. It's almost, I kind of want to see if I can find an emulator for this now, because I've genuinely never played it, because I was never an N64 guy, and
Yeah.
I'm intrigued
Yeah.
to that point. Like how, like it's that notable that AEW are like, we'll use that engine. Use the SmackDown engine. That was awesome.
Well, exactly. Like it seems to have gone down in like folklore as like this is the wrestling game, like the best wrestling game ever. It was the most fun to play. Whereas I don't know whether I was just, I don't know, how old will I have been? Like maybe like 11, 10 or 11, something like that when
Must
I
have been
got this
11,
console.
10, actually 10. It came out in 2000, the game, presuming you got it when it roughly when it came out.
We started high school in 99, didn't we? So
So
I would
yeah,
have
so
been
you'd have
like
been 11.
11,
Yeah.
nearly 12 maybe. So yeah, unless I was just really shit and just didn't get it or something. Like I just remember being really underwhelmed with it after like wanting it for so long, and I got it and was like, and I just never really played it that much. And then I think I got a PlayStation, or I already had one at this point, and just ended up playing SmackDown and stuff. And then this one just never really mattered. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, but interesting. You know, please let us know in any kind of comments if you feel strongly one way or another around
Yeah.
the
If this
nominated
truly
game.
is the best game ever, tell us why. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, let us know.
Do you want you to
Um,
play it? Let me know.
and then the next one was WrestleMania 18 for the GameCube. Now I remember I pretty much got a GameCube to play this game, and it was because I saw it advertised and I was like, okay, this looks awesome. I think you mentioned before, I think it was the Raw game on Xbox or whatever,
Yes.
had like the shine kind of thing that
Yeah.
made it feel more realistic. Like these guys were like proper shiny, and to me that made it feel super realistic. And looking at, you know, at the time 2002, you know, was that around the time of like SmackDown 2 maybe?
Yeah, I think
So
that's fair.
I feel like that was. I don't know. It just like graphically, it just felt like the GameCube one was miles ahead. But then, unfortunately, actually playing it played like dog shit.
Yeah, I remember
So,
trying to play this with you, because the GameCube was obviously nice and portable. I may even remember you bringing it to my house, and I think we ended up playing Super Smash Brothers more than anything. But
yeah,
we tried. We tried.
we did give it a go, but it just wasn't. It wasn't great. And then the only other one, which I don't think I ever actually played, but obviously we had on this list Legends of Wrestling from 2001. But in 2011, they brought out WWE All Stars. So I think it was on like the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 and stuff like that. But I never ended up playing this game. But I feel like this looked like it had a better roster than Legends of
Yeah.
Wrestling. At least more
I'll
legends.
be honest with you, Carl, and I'll be vague enough about it. I think we both had a similar experience with the Xbox 360, in which um, we had that many games on the 360 for whatever reason, and you ended up not playing much, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like I spent more time messing with the Xbox 360 than I did actually playing the games. I'll be honest with you, but still hours of fun. But yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot of games I remember playing. I had a 360, but I don't remember playing much on it, if I'm honest with you.
Well, exactly. And I don't know. I feel like it's one of them looking back now, if you look at the roster, and don't get me wrong, this was like cartoony and it didn't feel real. You know, like it was, everyone had like a fucking 12 pack and they were built like fucking, you know, Donkey Kong. But if you look at the roster, like, you know, my kind of issues that I had with Legends of Wrestling seems to have been addressed here. They had Savage, they had Warrior, they had Hogan, they had Rock, going up against the likes of Cena, Randy Orton. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like this could have been like the game, but at the same time, it did look a bit cartoonish. But I can't really give a fair review because I never really played it. So
Yeah, no, I get that. I think it was definitely going for a more cartoony look, but yeah, sadly, I've never played it either. But it could have been everything that Legends of Wrestling should have been. Who knows?
Yeah.
I've got one question before we finish the segment, though, Carl.
Go on.
Will you be entertaining Battlegrounds? What do you think of it so far?
Do you know what? I've not seen that much about it, but I believe this looks a bit cartoony as well.
It's very cartoony, like to the point that it's like I think Undertaker can summon lightning and stuff like that. It's very cartoony. So it won't take it seriously. It's a bit like, do you ever play NBA Playgrounds?
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. Like,
okay.
A less sporty,
Just
more
like WWE Street.
Essentially. So this is our answer to a wrestling game this year. They decided not to bring out another 2K this year, given everything going on with the coronavirus. I think because of the difficulty in getting people in to do mocap and stuff like that, I think. But yeah, do you think this will be one you entertain, or would you rather go for more of a 2K game when it does come out?
I mean, definitely go for more of a 2K game than this, but who knows? I mean, let's see. I'll wait for the reviews, see what it's like, see how it plays, and then maybe I'll get it. Not necessarily on release, but maybe a little bit down the line.
Yeah, when it's like either free on PlayStation Plus or £3.
Pretty much when it's bargain buckets and.
And on the next 2K game, do you think you'll entertain going back into that nostalgia, creating the A to the K tag team?
I mean, just for that reason alone, we're going to have to get it. But yeah, I think it's one of them. I'm a big fan of 2K in terms of like the NBA games and stuff. But
yes,
I don't know. Something about the 2K games just feel, creative suite aside, like the actual gameplay and stuff like that. And especially, the last couple of years, as they've been absolutely trounced, haven't they? Like apparently they've given up all kind of on graphics and like how much they look like each other and stuff like that. So
yeah, well, I believe again the most recent WWE game, I think people cited the graphics as a massive backstep, like compared to what they had the previous year. So I don't know what went on there, but again, you got to hope that they respond to criticism and maybe look at what they're doing and improve it, especially because they got an extra year essentially to work on it. So, here's hoping. And yeah, I mean, for me, I'm like, this could potentially be a live stream right here.
Oh yeah,
A to the K going for the tag team titles. Why not?
Let's absolutely do it. Why not?
Awesome. So that is our unique segment for the week, Carl. I think that's all the ones we can talk about.
This week's episode is brought to you by floriday.co.uk, where you can get all the latest news about Florida, Disney, and Universal Studios, as well as valuable tips and touring plans to get the most out of your Florida holiday. That's floriday.co.uk, the sunshine state of mind.
Well, hello, Carl and Anthony. Hey, it's the hardcore legend Mick Foley saying hello. What a beautiful afternoon it is. Wow, gorgeous May afternoon. There's a view of the river at the Foley compound. Just want to say hello to you guys and let you know that I'm looking forward to listening to you on A to the K, the podcast. I am not yet exposed to much in the world of podcasting, but I think I'm going to start. I hear great things about you guys. I appreciate you being fans. I'm going to go out on a limb and just guess that you guys are big wrestling fans, so I'm going to thank you for your support over the years. Have a nice day.